Hey, welcome back to the Leadership Studio. Once again, we're going to be covering fundraising today, and also we weren't going to look a little bit specifically at the board and what the board means around fundraising. And with us today is a great expert on boards from the United Way, Ronnie Hagerty. Ronnie, thank you so much for being here on our program and in our class.
My pleasure, Bob.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
Very good. Ronnie, let's start with a question that I've asked many people who've sat in your chair. If you were writing a book, sort of the perfect book on fundraising, which is one that you would write,
of course,
what would some of the chapters look like? What are some of the parts of the books? What are some of the key components of fundraising?
Well, I think fundraising is one of those topics that just terrifies people because they picture themselves standing on a street corner with a can, or alternatively, they picture themselves calling on the CEO of ExxonMobil and asking for $10 million. And in truth, fundraising is neither of those extremes. It could be, I suppose. That I think I would start with that fundraising is really friend-raising. People don't give to causes, they give to people. People give to success, not distress. So many times you'll find an organization that has its appeal around what we need and what we must have and what I want you to do for me, where the opposite is really true. You have to tell me, what do I get out of it? Why do I care? Why is your organization special? It's really about building relationships. It's about, so I have to put my chapters in there, don't I? It's about, so what's the mission?
Yeah.
And then what's the message? That I come from a marketing background, and I tend to think of things the way you think about promoting cereal or detergent. And I ask people all the time, well, what is it when you're wandering down the grocery store aisle that captures your attention? Why do you buy Tide instead of Cheer? Why do you buy Cheerios instead of Raisin Bran? And we don't always think of our nonprofits in that way. So I think my book would probably have a marketing spin to it. I would try to talk about positioning. Who's your target audience? What is it? How do target audiences get their information? Are they reading the newspaper? Probably not. Are they online? Are they tweeting? So it's a really different book than I would have written 5 years ago.
Really? So do you think the nature of fundraising has changed in 5 years, or have you just learned a lot more?
Probably both.
Yeah.
I think what is happening, it's the whole conversation about multiple generations. That we know that certainly some of the baby boomers, certainly the greatest generation, they read the newspaper. That's what they do in the morning. They pick it up off the stoop and they go in and have some coffee and read the newspaper.
That's what I do. Do you do that?
I don't, actually. That I go
You're like a newfangled woman, Ronnie.
Well, I go to my office and I have the great good luxury of one of our marketing team sort of summarizes the news of the day. So I sit at my computer and I read it quickly, and if I want to read the story and get a little more information, then I can go to the source. So that's the lazy person's way of getting the news. I am a big radio listener, and it's a traffic town. You spend a lot of time in your car, so I listen to 4 or 5 or 6 news channels and get enough information to be dangerous that way. I like Houston Business Journal. I read the Wall Street Journal every day, but at the end of the day, not at the beginning. And increasingly, I'm realizing the importance of social media for information and updates. So if we think about it from a fundraising perspective, the message that I would give to my mother would be very different than the message that I would give to my son or daughter and their friends. And it's a real challenge, because if you were once upon a time able to do a piece of direct mail and hit your whole target audience, okay, good, we're done, finished. I can't do that.
No.
I have not one channel, but multiple channels, and that's why the target audience is so important, that my cause may not be your cause. Why waste time and money trying to reach you if you're never going to give?
Your point about not giving, people don't give to distressed organizations, they give to winners, in a sense. I've heard you make that before. I've heard other people make it, but it's not something that seems to have sunk in with a lot of the fundraising community, right? There are still people who go out raising money because they're about to go broke. And people really do want to give to the organization that's doing extremely well.
Well, so let's make an interesting contrast here, that distress. So I worked at MD Anderson Cancer Center. That's distress. I had such and have such tremendous admiration for the people who do the work on the floors every day with the patients. that is distress that I can do something about if I give to that cause. I have the power to make change in those people's lives who are suffering from a really terrible disease. On the other hand, if MD Anderson came to me and said, we are losing money, we are about to go under, we don't know what we're doing, our researchers are clueless, I mean, why would I give to an organization like that when I could give to one that was powerful and dynamic? And I think the most brilliant marketing slogan in the history of all time is making cancer history.
Yeah.
You know, it's a double entendre. It is history in terms of the progress that we're making, but it's also, for me as a person, if I'm experiencing cancer, you're going to make my cancer history. So I use that as an example with virtually every board training I do and say, what is the slogan that captures the essence of who you are and what you do so that people really feel the passion that they, and I think that's another difference in fundraising today. So we used to give to charities, right?
Yep.
And we would pass the hat or pass the collection plate and, you know, please give to my cause. We need your money. We need your help. That's more of the distress side of things. But we've really transitioned into a world where philanthropy is what is important to people. And if I am a philanthropist, I have an opportunity to change the world. I can see that my contribution, whether it's time or talent or treasure, is really going to move the needle on an issue that I care a lot about. That's very different from, here's a few cents, you know, I'll buy a cup of coffee, and that may or may not make a difference. And so what the challenge then is for nonprofits is if we really are about philanthropy and changing lives, then particularly for our millennial donors, prove it. How do I know that you can do what you say you do? Don't just tell me what good work you're doing. Don't tell me you served 100 people. That's nice, but so what? Did it matter? How is life different? Are they staying in school? Are they staying out of trouble? Are they going to college? Why did my contribution matter?
Yeah. Let me ask you, in regards to that marketing part, how important is it for fundraising for you to have sort of a marketing piece? I mean, I hear this a lot from people. Well, I need a brochure to go into, and I know you and I don't always agree on things.
Right.
I personally think it's all about you, and it's not necessarily the brochure. It's about how you're going to communicate. But there are plenty of people who say, well, I need a brochure first. What do you say to those people?
I don't think it's either or. I think it's probably both and, just as there are multiple channels of communications. So again, who's your target audience? If it is someone who gets information by reading the printed piece, then I would say, you know, my mom wants to see something in writing, to put it in that pile of things. She's going to study them. She's going to think about how so there are lots of folks like that. But if I have an iPad and I'm getting my information minute by minute, no, then you don't need a brochure. But you know what you need? A message. That how do you break through the noise? Think of all of the opportunities that we have for information gathering. You know, that's why I tend to not be much of a moviegoer or a TV watcher. I'm lost in information all the time. So how do I, as a nonprofit, really wake you up and say, "Whoo, wow, I want to go back and learn more about that"?
Yeah. There was a time, remember, when people thought you needed a DVD and you'd go into someone's office and play DVD, and I remember hating that because no one really wanted to see a DVD, you know.
Again, time is such a huge issue that we tend not to have the luxury of time, and so when you do get that appointment, when you do have a chance to visit with someone, you do not want to bore them. And in the nonprofit world, we love to tell people everything that we ever knew about our organization. And if you have 3 hours, I can tell you my story. Well, no, because I don't have 3 hours. So what about 30 minutes? Or what about 3 minutes? How can you capture the essence of your message, of your pitch, if you will, in 3 minutes? And I think fundraising is really sales and marketing. Now, that offends people quite frequently because they say, no, my cause is much more important than Ford Motor Company's cause. But the reality is the audience makes decisions based on many of the same kind of strategies. And so how do I think about it from the standpoint of a consumer who has lots of opportunities, who has X number of dollars of discretionary income that might be given to a philanthropic purpose? Why me? And I have to think of how to resonate with you. And, you know, so how do I figure out where you spend your money? How do I figure out what causes you're involved with? Well, I look at other people's websites and I see who their board members are,
Yep.
and I see who their
Yep.
sponsors are of their events. I collect invitations from galas and lunches and dinners. I read all of the sort of four-color fancy pieces that we now have in Houston that talk about who went to that party or that party. And you start to see a pattern of, oh, so Mrs. Smith really likes to do lunch. I don't really see her leading committees or chairing events, but she obviously is a lady who lunches a lot. And who are her friends and what causes are they involved in? Because she's probably going to be involved with those causes. So it's a science.
Yeah, interesting. I want to talk about boards, but before we get to boards, I want to talk about you, Ronnie. I mean,
Okay.
did you grow up here in Houston? Are you from Houston?
Now I'm from the Midwest. I lived in Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan.
So where did you go to high school?
Notre Dame Academy in
Where's
Toledo,
that?
Toledo, Ohio.
Toledo, Ohio.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then college?
St. Mary's, Notre Dame, Indiana.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So right up there.
Right
and
up-
then what'd you do after college?
I went to New York and I worked for a marketing company right on Fifth Avenue. And it was an incredible opportunity for a bright-eyed and bushy-tailed person
Yeah.
fresh out of college to live right near Columbia University.
Oh, wow.
And the company that...
My alma mater.
Oh, well, all right. So we have that in common, too. The company that I worked for was some former General Foods, a company that doesn't exist any longer, but very large consumer product company. And they had a client base that they had developed through their networks when they were in the corporate world and started their own small business, really. And I just, timing is everything, and I was looking for a job in New York, and it was a friend of a friend's mother who said, "We'll stop in and see them. They're really nice, and they'll help you out." And it happened their secretary had quit that day.
So was
And-
that your first job as a secretary?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, actually, it was as a teacher. I taught for a year, and I hated every minute of it. And I thought, I'm never doing that again. So I went to New York. There was a teacher strike that year, thank heavens.
Uh-huh.
It was serendipity, and called on these folks, and they said, if you're willing to type, we'll let you do other things. Said, works for me, let's do it. And to make a long story shorter, they allowed me to do anything that I thought
Wow.
I could do. I had a boss who was just amazing. He said to me shortly after I started working there that I will let you take on anything that you are confident that you can do. The only thing I ask is if you run into trouble, let me know. I don't like surprises.
Wow.
And that's a lesson that has
That's a
stayed
good
with
boss.
me. He was great, very, very unusual. So here's this little Midwesterner who is running up and down the streets of New York talking to all of the major consumer products companies, General Mills, General Foods, Alcoa. We did some work for one of GM, General Mills, and General Motors.
Wow.
And it was just a fascinating opportunity.
And how long were you there?
I was there for 10 years.
Wow. So you stayed in New York for a while then?
Yeah, I did. Then moved to Houston.
And why did you come to Houston?
My husband was transferred here.
There you go.
And so I worked for a couple of small marketing PR firms. I worked for Helen Vollmer. I don't know if you know her firm, but she was, until recently, she merged with a large company, but she was the largest woman-owned public relations firm in the state anyhow. So another great learning opportunity that she is a brilliant PR person, and she taught us little tricks like when you're talking to somebody, especially if it's a tough pitch, stand up. Smile, that you can convey. So I still remember that, as I said, it's marketing, that if you're going to make a tough call on a potential donor, don't just sit slumped in your chair, stand up, get some energy going, and you'll have a much better shot
Very
at
good.
it.
Now tell me how you made the transition. Why did you get into the nonprofit world?
Well, I'll tell you. I decided that I was really sick and tired of all of these crazy clients who would call the day before Thanksgiving and say, we have a pitch that we need it on Friday. We have to have it Friday morning, first thing. And so there I would be all during Thanksgiving stirring turkey gravy with one hand and typing something with the other. And I thought, no, I've had enough of this. So I'm going to go to the nonprofit world, which is pure and wholesome. And I'd been a volunteer.
Oh, you thought it was pure and wholesome?
I did.
Yeah.
And so naively, the first place I decided that I wanted to go was MD Anderson, which combines academia and medicine and large egos.
Yeah.
And people are political, and so that was my big lesson shifting over to the nonprofit sector. At the time, I was volunteering for United Way teaching marketing workshops.
Oh, okay.
And so that was kind of how I got connected with there.
And
so
then did you go right to work after MD Anderson?
after MD Anderson, I went to United Way. That I had learned that there was a position open for their consulting practice, which used to be called the Management Assistance Program. We call ourselves Nonprofit Connection nowadays. But they were looking for somebody who would be able to sell the program, frankly. And so I thought, well, I could do that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting. And I thought it was a way to see the other side of the nonprofit world. I had been working on what was then one of Houston's largest campaigns. It was $150 million at MD Anderson. And of course, Rice just finished their $1 billion campaign.
right?
So it's amazing how quickly
Yeah.
those numbers have changed. But so I applied for the position. I thought it would be interesting, and it was, my pitch was all about marketing and why I thought that would make a difference to nonprofits.
How long have you been at United Way now?
I've been there 18 years.
Wow.
I never intended to, I've never been any place for that long, but I have had just a remarkable opportunity there. It's an amazing organization, very innovative, very open to trying different things, and so we've had the great good fortune of really exploring lots of avenues for developing a really robust consulting practice for nonprofits.
I've had Anna in this chair before.
I know that.
We've talked about
I know
this
that.
stuff. But tell me about United Way in regards to fundraising. If I am an organization that maybe is a United Way agency, what percentage of my budget might come from the United Way?
It's actually smaller than most people realize. It's probably less than 15%. That may be different at other United Ways in other parts of the country. We're all separate 501c3s with local governing boards. So it can vary quite a bit. A trend that we're seeing a lot in the United Way world is a movement away from those long-time affiliate relationships and moving more into initiatives. Sort of the community impact model is what we call it.
Sort of shorter term?
Shorter term, really focused on one of the issues, which might be financial stability, education, health, that we are, as many Texas organizations are, a bit sort of counterculture, that we still maintain a number of affiliate relationships, but we have really moved in the direction of some very powerful initiatives, and Thrive is one of those. It's about creating financial stability for lower income families. And as we move into our 7th year, we've had some amazing results. And it involves budgeting, financial coaching, helping people acquire assets, which are really the secret of long-term stability. And more recently, we started an education initiative where we are in early grade reading. So that's different. We have partnerships rather than affiliates. And the partnerships can change. And that is moving into a new direction. I think the other big difference in United Way fundraising is we are also very focused on major gifts. That really from its inception, United Way had corporate campaigns, and that we...
And it's major gifts, is it primarily corporate
individuals?
Gifts?
No, we're really working at individual giving, relationship building. We call our fund development folks are now called donor relations.
Oh, okay.
And so we are really focused on building those individual
relationships. So you think of
relationships.
United Way as the place that gets the big checks from ExxonMobil?
And we do. We still have amazing corporate support, but increasingly we are looking at ways to engage those individuals who work at those companies in a more personal way. And we've been very successful. We have a very large Young Leaders Initiative with folks under 40 who are really interested in being involved in the community on their terms.
Yeah.
We have a very large women's initiative, which is really comprised of Houston's movers and shakers when it comes to, we have a lot of female business
Great women
owners.
on that group, yeah.
Yeah, it's
some of our board members sit on that.
Very impressive group of women and who've raised significant funds for United Way. So it's really shifted quite a bit in recent years from that traditional corporate only model.
Let's talk about boards, Ronnie. In regards to, let's start with fundraising. How many times have you and I met CEOs and they've said, well, I wish I could raise more money, but my board does just not raise money. What expectations should we have of a board in regards to fundraising?
Well, I think expectations is really the key word. That very often we recruit board members with very little discussion about what their job is, because we don't want them to say no. We want them to say, oh, I'd love to serve on your board, and we are afraid if we tell them what we really have in mind, that they would say, oh, no, I can't. Because many people say when they're asked to serve on a board, I will do anything you ask, just don't ask me to fundraise. Well, but that's a key responsibility.
Yeah.
So I think it really involves starting out the whole recruitment process in a very different way, moving from the traditional nominating committee that meets once a year. It says we have 3 slots to fill. What 3 people do we know who aren't too overcommitted? And rather looking at it as a year-round board development process and saying, so if we see who's on our board now, what are the gaps? Do we need a marketing person? Do we need an IT person? Do we need an educator? And then identifying, just as if you were running a small business and you're an entrepreneur and cost were no object, and you would say, the people that I need to hire for this business are X. Well, we can't necessarily hire all those people in the nonprofit world. So what do? We recruit them as board members. But we need to do that intentionally. Once we have that candidate, we have a coffee with them, we bring them over to the organization, introduce them to some staff, show them some of what we do if we have the kind of work that we can show it off, the Boys and Girls Clubs or the food bank. And then we say, we're really thinking about, we're expanding our board or we're filling board spaces. Is that something you would be interested in? Might we submit your name as a candidate? So it's not a slam dunk. It's not a would you be on our board? It's a conversation, and it's a series of conversations. And once we've determined that we think this individual is going to be a good fit, then we bring out our statement of expectations, and we expect you to attend 10 meetings a year, to make a personal financial contribution, not in kind, a personal cash contribution. Do I have to attend an event? Do I need to buy tickets to the gala? What do I have to do? Do I have to serve on a committee? If you don't tell me the rules, then you can't hold me accountable after the fact. So I think it's a much more robust process at the front end, and then people want to do a good job. I firmly believe that everyone signs on hoping to do a good job, but if we have failed to inform them what that looks like, it's not fair to be critical of their failure to do that.
It's amazing. I've been on a lot of boards. I know you have as well, and it's really every organization treats you completely differently from another organization, and you can tell very quickly where the organizations you want to be a part of, because they try to engage you immediately, and they're asking you to do a lot, but also asking you to be engaged a lot. And there's others that you just never hear from. It's crickets.
Just pro forma. It's sign here, and the meetings are at such and such a date. Yeah, I'm on a board of a smaller organization, and I have to say that the CEO makes is very diligent about meeting with each of the board members at least once a year. Really talking. So, how's this working out for you? What is it that you would like to do that you're not doing? How could we engage you more fully? Now, that takes a boatload of time, and you as a CEO know that.
Yeah.
But the reality is, I feel important. I mean, she really wants me. A lot of what she'll ask me to do through the course of the year is, we're sending out a proposal. Would you review it for me? We're thinking about changing some of the copy on our website. Could you take a look at it? Well, I love to do that. I'm a writer. I'm somebody who's interested in communication. So she understands my interests, my skills. I work for United Way. I'm very associated with United Way. I am not going to be your best fundraiser. I will make my personal contribution, but I am not in a position to call on people and ask them to give money in the same way that another candidate might. And I'm very upfront about that. I mean, I've been invited to serve.
But you know people, and you can tell them these are people that are primed and ready. These would be great candidates.
I can make good recommendations, and I can make introductions. So I may not be able to call on a local foundation on your behalf, but I can give so-and-so a call and say, I'm on this board, I want to be upfront with you about that, but may I give her your direct line and let this organization give you a call? And I do that often.
When you look and you see in regards to boards that are doing the right things, are there some examples of organizations where you think, wow, they're doing the right things absolutely with their board, and are sort of a best practice example?
Well, again, it's a more labor-intensive approach for the CEO or the senior staff of an organization. I am not working for a nonprofit. I am an engineer. I am a doctor. I am an attorney. I have no idea what you want me to do. So when a CEO says, I really need you to be more involved, I say, okay, but if you don't fill in that blank, I say goodbye, see you at the next meeting, and if I don't hear from you, I think you have to be very literal about what you want me to do personally. And that's, again, where I tend to be biased toward a smaller board, and to be very clear when I'm recruiting, why have I recruited that person? So rather than say, I need a Hispanic on the board, I need an IT person who has good networks perhaps in the Hispanic community or the Asian community, the African American community. But let's recruit people for their skills and their talents and their passion about the issue, and then let's tell them how they can use those skills.
Many times in regards to fundraising and boards, there will be an expectation, and in the rules of being a board or the responsibilities of being a board member, it's pretty much laid out. And before anyone joins a board, they're told that there's a give or get. Some organizations, I know it's at 10,000. I know many that are at 5,000. Some are at 2,500, 1,000. What is your recommendation on those give and or gets that different boards have?
You're talking about a specific amount?
Yeah.
I think that
per year that they're supposed
I
to
think
give or
it's
get.
important to have an amount. I think it depends a lot on the size of the organization and the capacity of their board members. That an organization the size of Children at Risk is going to have perhaps a board that is more capable of giving at a higher level than a smaller organization with $1 million budget that is more modest in scope. And we're always wanting to have those board members whose names are on street signs or on buildings, but they're often taken. Bill Gates is busy. And so how do we understand who we should be recruiting to our board? And it may be a building process. I think a specific amount is probably a good idea. You have some organizations, federally qualified health clinics would be an example, where you have to have a 50% constituent board. Well, if you have constituents, they are not going to be in a position to give a significant way. I think the sentence that makes the most sense to me is to give a gift that is personally significant. So what might be a stretch for me might not be for somebody else at all. And I think the other sort of rule of thumb that is helpful to me when I think about it is that this organization should be one of my top 2 or 3 causes. Maybe my church would be first, my faith community, but then I should be number 2 or number 3. And it's interesting, I did a board retreat not too long ago, and the board chair very proudly announced that he serves on 12 boards.
Yeah.
Now, he happens to be an insurance salesman, so
So maybe it's good for business.
I wonder what that's all about. But, you cannot possibly be
I think we hear this all the time.
You do.
I'm on 9 boards, I'm on 8 boards. It's
But shame on the organization for allowing that.
Yeah.
And I have a big fairness issue, too. So I think if you're bringing somebody to the board who is a name, let's just say it that way, and you don't care whether they come to board meetings, you don't expect them to serve on a committee, and yet you want me to not miss a meeting and to serve on 3 committees. Wait a minute, what am I, chopped liver? No, it's fairness. So back to your how much should people give, and I'm not a big fan of give or get.
Tell us about that.
I prefer give and get, because far too often I'll say, well, I really am not going to give anything, but I'm going to get somebody to buy a table, or I'm going to get somebody to buy a sponsorship in your program. That didn't hurt you. I want you to really have that commitment. I want you to stretch. I want you to say, this organization is really important to me. I want you to get, too. But I'm less rigorous about that expectation than I am about a personal gift. I think, how can I go to a foundation or to a corporation and say, would you please invest in my organization? And then say, when they ask, and many do you have 100% board participation? And I say no. I don't think so. That doesn't work.
So you would not count if they got something as participation by that board members? Yeah. So we had this debate at Children at Risk, actually.
Really?
We had a board member who was part of a corporation, and he made sure that his corporation gave $70,000.
Which is great.
But there was another board member who's a bank president who said, I really think he needs to give personally. And there was this debate about whether this guy should give personally, and then finally someone said, I'm okay with $70,000. So what would you have said, Ronnie, if you were part of that debate?
I think I would have said, we really value your corporate contribution. It is terribly meaningful to us. But the board is the governors of this organization. You are the stewards of this corporation. And I think it is absolutely essential for each and every person to make a personal financial contribution, because that says, I believe in this organization. I believe in the work. I believe in the mission. I mean, you helped facilitate that corporate gift, and that is very valuable and much appreciated. But we want a personal gift. I just feel really strongly about that.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, and the room was divided.
Oh, I've heard that conversation before,
so
and you can.
And 70,000 is nothing to sneeze at, and we're happy to get it.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of
So
course.
it's a win-win situation, frankly.
It is sort of, but then again, you get back to, I don't work for a large corporation. I'm an attorney, and I have my own small firm, or I work in a retail industry. My company is not in a position to give gifts like that. So.
Oh, there's no doubt that this person could have also given personally.
Yeah,
too,
I kind of get into the whole.
Yeah.
Are we treating people differently?
Yeah.
And that's where I'm kind of a fan of advisory councils or president's councils, where you have those folks that have a different ability to participate, and they are not going to serve on committees and they're not going to come to all the meetings because they're too busy. Put them on a council. You can put their name on the letterhead.
Yeah.
Really recognize them at an annual event of some sort. But I think board members need to participate in an equal fashion.
A quick question, and then I want to get to some of the tweeted questions from the students. We ask this every week as well. When you look around town and you see all the organizations that we have here in Houston, great many high-performing organizations, are there a couple that you would sort of point out or separate out to point to students and say, these are organizations that are doing a great job fundraising-wise. These are good models. Knowing that there are many of those, but there's maybe a couple that you really like. Are there a couple that you...
Well, of course, I'd have to say United Way.
Of course, that's good. Yes.
Would have to put that at the very top of the list. And I do think it's our really strong emphasis on donor relations and our ability to build those relationships. You know, I think if you would look at an organization like Houston Area Women's Center, Big Brothers Big Sisters, Boys and Girls Clubs, I think there are some emerging organizations that are doing strong work in new fields like SARE Jobs for Progress. As we look at the employment challenges that we're facing now, they're really looking at the trades and how do we bring the trades back and give people different opportunities. You know, I could go pick a mission, any mission, and I could probably come up with an organization that I think is doing great work. I hate to single anyone out.
And then the other thing, I think you and I have talked about this before, is where you look around and you see these underperforming, great missions, great potential, and they're just not doing what they need to do.
Well, I think we are at a point in time. I am often asked how many nonprofits are there in the Houston area. The last number I've seen is 21,000.
Wow.
So,
last I heard was 14,000, but you told me that maybe 8 years ago.
Yeah, probably so. So it keeps going up.
Yeah.
Texas is second after California in terms of number of nonprofits. We don't really want to have the most nonprofits. I mean, it's hard to imagine that there is an issue that has not been addressed in some fashion. Now, having said that, I'm the last person who would want to stifle innovation and creativity, that certainly there are new and better ways to address an issue. I think many nonprofits operate in a silo, and they really don't do their market research. They have no clue who else is out there, what else is going on. So as long as I've done this work, the most common call I get is, I want to start a nonprofit.
Oh, we hear it all the time.
And I used to be so supportive and very helpful. And if they'll listen to me, I will read them the Riot Act for 30 minutes and really try to talk them out of it and talk about market research. Look at our 211 community resource database, which is online, and find out how many education organizations or how many early childhood organizations.
Organizations doing the exact same things many times, maybe in different parts of town. And that brings up the other thing, which is so many organizations that just seem prime for merger, right?
Yes, but the M word is a bad word.
Oh yeah, because they all have their own boards, they have their own egos, and they...
Well, it was funny because you and I both participated in Power Tools many times and been on the advisory committee, but I did a session on mergers one year, and I think I had 4 people.
Really? Is that right?
I'm serious, and I thought, it tells me everything I need to know.
Well, that's it. People don't want to merge, and I know that.
When you know the reason that the CEOs often know They know who the players are and may have even had conversations with a colleague about, what if we were to combine our assets and our efforts. And it's the board that votes
it's the
no,
board,
because the question is, well, who's going to be the board chair?
Right.
How many of us will be on the new board? And that's where it falls apart. I have had many merger conversations, really gotten pretty far in the process, and at the end of the day, the board says no because we won't be in charge anymore.
And I think, in the time that I've been at Children's Risk, 6 different times we have tried to do a merger with someone, and usually we do it when the other organization has not had a CEO or is about to go
There's
under,
an interim, there's a space,
something going
right?
on, and every time it's fallen through because a board
know.
is worried about something.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a shame too, isn't it?
Well, it is, because we really would get better leverage out of our resources.
I mean, I always point to the Food Bank and the End Hunger Network.
Right.
What a great merger
That's a good
that
example.
was. And both CEOs are doing well, both
Doing really
boards
well.
are doing well.
Right.
So let me ask you a couple of these questions.
Good.
So here, Richard Kendall wants to know about fundraising and development efforts. How are they different at the United Way than maybe other organizations?
Well, I think at the United Way, again, there's that corporate component, and fundraising for a corporate campaign is different from approaching someone for an individual gift. So what we have created around the corporate campaign is a really powerful fundraising structure. We make it easy for an organization to inform their employees about the various issues in the community. To really see the big picture, we do a biennial community assessment where we do a random household sample to find out what do you think are the most critical issues in the community, in your neighborhood, in your home. So I think we provide very strong investment advice, and for busy people who are really interested in making a difference but perhaps don't want to take the time to do the research, I think that's one approach.
Yeah.
Then I think to get into the more of the individual giving, it's a strategy that is more labor intensive. It's more in a different way. The other is very labor intensive as well, but it requires a lot more sort of research on the individual's interests and causes that they are passionate about, really helping them find opportunities to get more engaged in those issues. And realizing that you can't be everything to everybody. I think that's what's really hard. So we focused on a couple of critical issues now.
Some organizations, we could point to Rice, maybe the MFA, as being fundraising juggernauts. Texas Children's Hospital.
Right.
Is the United Way in that category yet?
I would say yes.
Yeah,
the campaigns we are marshaling, I mean, our goal this year is 84 million. We raised 75 last year. That's
a major, 1 year, that's a lot.
That's a lot of money. That's a major corporation.
I think we're a little under that. So.
Well, I always say if there weren't a United Way, somebody would probably have to invent it, because it is a very efficient way to connect the community. And so we have relationships with the corporate community, with the nonprofit sector, with the public sector. We can bring people together in a way to have conversations and to talk about issues that perhaps no one else is quite so well positioned to do. And so fundraising is really a piece of what we do.
Yeah. Nicole has a great question. We've talked about the Association of Fundraising Professionals a number of times here. Can students join the AFP?
Yes, we actually have a student membership now, which is, I think, a really good strategy on the part of the organization, that any of your professional organizations, and it can be AFP or it can be the American Marketing Association, they're not cheap. And so typically if you're going to do one, you're only going to do one. I think if you are in the nonprofit world, whether you know if fundraising is sort of your niche, the reality is you're going to be fundraising. And the more you know about the lingo, I mean, there is a taxonomy, there's a jargon in every industry, and fundraising has its own, what's an endowment, what's a planned gift, what's prospecting. So I think anybody who is going to be in the nonprofit field would really benefit from being an AFP member. I'm on that board, actually.
And so many entry-level jobs in that area.
Oh, exactly. And that is incredible training. I encourage people to, if they're really at all interested in the field of nonprofit work or fundraising, to take Fundraising 1 and 2 that is sponsored by the AFP, which is delivered at Rice University. It's very affordable. You learn the sort of the concepts. You meet the people who are active in the field. I think you've probably taught one of those courses a time or two. And so it really gives you exposure to all aspects of it. And I think that it is really, when you think about it, one of the only professional organizations available to nonprofit professionals. That we don't have an American Bar Association, we don't have an American Medical Association.
And wonderful networking, way to meet lots of people.
Exactly,
So, very
exactly.
good. Sandra Helsher has a great question. This is about the United Way. She wants to know how do you continue. I don't know how many years ago when there was a lot of negative press about the United Way, which she's referring to.
It's been quite a few years ago, right?
It seems like I was young back then.
Right, yeah.
But does that still come up? Do people still, and how do you deal with that press?
It does come up from time to time.
Yeah.
It surprises me, but isn't that true in any news story, that the bad story is out there, the backstory, the good story, there's never a correction, there's never a what happened next. So the reality is William Aramone was a very bad man. He did things that were illegal. The reality is his board allowed him to do it. And several of those board members sat in jail cells next to him. So I like people to understand that this board business is a very serious responsibility, that you are charged with the fiduciary obligation to manage those generous gifts that people entrust you with effectively. I mean, from a legal standpoint, you have the duties of care, loyalty, and obedience. And if you fail to honor those duties, now it doesn't happen often, but you can wind up sitting in a cell in an orange jumpsuit. That
they tell me it's the new black.
It could be. I don't know. I mean, so that was the national organization. That was not one of the individual chapters. There was corrective action taken as quickly as possible. It was a painful learning experience.
Did that hurt United Way for a number of years?
It definitely had a negative impact on the campaign. I can say with great pride that we have had a clean audit every year in our 90-plus years history. Anna Babin, our CEO, is a CPA. We have
you guys are squeaky clean now.
But United Way of Greater Houston always was.
Yeah.
That we definitely had an impact that resulted from that. But it doesn't even have to be the same organization. When any nonprofit has a scandal, it affects all of us.
That's true.
Because everybody says, see, that's what happens with these nonprofits. And the big risk that we're facing now is doing away with the philanthropic deduction. That a lot of people are saying, well, why not? Let's just eliminate that, and it's only for rich people. Well, no, not really. The whole culture of philanthropy is really integral to our country's history.
Amy Rogers wants to know, what advice do you give to someone who's starting out a career in the nonprofit sector?
I think my best advice is to consider several possibilities. Have as many conversations as possible. I don't know too many people, and I'm sure you're one of them, Bob, that, if somebody calls me and says, can I come for an informational interview, I am very happy to visit with them. And, I'll pull out my contacts and say, call so-and-so and call so-and-so, and one conversation leads to another. So have some informational interviews. Have a little bit of focus about what you want to do. It's kind of off-putting to me when somebody says, well, I don't care what I do, I'd like to do anything. Really? That surely there's some cause that is of greater interest. If you don't like dogs and cats, don't apply to the SPCA. If you don't like kids, forget about Big Brothers.
It's just easier if you have a passion about it, isn't it? I mean,
well, and surely that a little research will help you. I mean, maybe you don't know what your passion is. And, so I'm a good example. I work at United Way, which is many passions.
That's right, that's everything.
My passion is the community at large and making a difference there. Well, some people would really rather think about health issues or think about financial issues.
Children's issues.
Children's issues, better example there.
Exactly.
So I think figure out what you're interested in, have as many conversations beforehand as possible. Thank people, follow up with people. You just never know. And many of the best jobs are never posted. It's the fact that your resume happened to be lying on somebody's desk the day someone walked out and said, I'm resigning, I'm going someplace else. And I think the other thing is work harder, do more. When there's an opportunity, say, can I try this? That don't just sit there and wait for somebody to give you your next assignment. Don't wait for somebody to discover you. You put yourself out there, take a risk. That's what leadership. It's suiting up and showing up.
I'm starting to think, and maybe I'm starting to sound like an old guy, but I'm seeing less of that than maybe I even saw 5 years ago in terms of people that want to take on more. It's sort of an interesting.
It is interesting because in this economy, you would
think.
People who are gainfully employed are being asked to do a lot more.
Yeah.
Those individuals, and it doesn't matter whether it's in the corporate sector or in the nonprofit sector, those individuals who really will step up and say, I can do it. I've not done it before. Can I ask your advice as I go along? But I have a colleague who is an attorney, owns his own firm. He's very successful, and he and I had this conversation. I said, so what do you think it takes to be successful? What's your secret? And he said, I work harder, I work longer, and I really care about what I do.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's important. You don't do something just because it's a good job. Don't do something because there's a lot of money there. The money will come, but you really have to like what you do.
Yeah. A lot to be said for perseverance, as your colleague said. So Sharhanda has a good question. Both you and I have doctorates. Do you think having a doctorate is an important thing in a development career?
Probably not.
Yeah, that's
if you
what I
want an
would say,
honest
too.
opinion, I did
I
it
think
because it's one of those life goals I've always, and I think it was very valuable because I do a lot of training, a lot of consulting. It reinforced some things that I thought I already knew, and it taught me things I didn't know. And in this environment, it is a continuous learning world. And if we are not constantly exposing ourselves to new kinds of information and new techniques and innovation and creativity, we're dead meat.
Yeah. Education important, but the doctorate not as important.
I love having it. It entertains me greatly,
yeah.
It's not required by any
I
means.
like it when people call me Dr.
I
Bob.
do too. I get a kick out of it. It's an ego thing.
No, we don't want to say that, but
Okay,
it is absolutely an ego thing. Liz Carreno wants to know about the give or get policy in reaction to our discussion. Is it a trend in nonprofits today?
I think that conversation has always been out there. I suspect that I take a harder line on the give side of it. I think the give or get expectation has always been there. I don't think it has been enforced with great rigor. I suspect that as more and more funders are asking for outcomes, not just in terms of programs, but in terms of board engagement, that we may see more enthusiastic insistence on that kind of giving. But again, my bias is if you are not willing to take out your checkbook and write a check, I mean, how important is this organization really?
Yeah. Another question, you mentioned about the United Way having an audit every year. How often should a nonprofit have an audit?
A lot depends on the size. That I've had interesting conversations. Some people say $1 million, some people say $5 million, and I think if you moved into the category where an audit is important, I would say every year. It's expensive, and some organizations say, well, we can't afford it. Well, sometimes my question to them is, can you afford to do business at all?
Yeah.
It's kind of like marketing. People say, well, we can't afford to do marketing. Well, can you afford not to? And if
you're going to ask for bigger money, you have to have an audit.
If you're going to play ball with the big leagues, then you have to meet those same standards. And with the exception of those smaller organizations, I think foundations particularly, really expect it.
And my experience as well, Ronnie, has been that there are some smaller auditing firms that sometimes you don't have to go to the top of the line, and you could get something a little bit less expensively.
I think you can. I caution that it is important, if possible, to have a firm or a practitioner who has nonprofit experience, because I've seen some pretty squirrely audits done by folks who were from very impressive firms, but simply were the new kids on the block. They were the newbies at the firm, and
so
they
you
really
don't want
just
a squirrely audit.
I prefer not. I like those nice, clean ones. Those are the best kind.
And Samantha Coates wants to know the major differences or changes. What different changes did you experience during your transition from marketing to fundraising? We've talked a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, again, I was kind of the odd person out when I first started doing this work because I did come with a strong marketing perspective. And I found when I began, there was a great deal of resistance. because there's something about, I've had people actually say to me that we don't do marketing. If people don't understand how important the work we do is, then we don't want their money. And I thought, well, that's an interesting point of view. That won't last for very long. So I don't know that I ever made the transition, to be really honest with you, that I still think of fundraising in marketing terms. As you know, I've talked about target audiences. I've talked about do your market research. Somebody else would call it due diligence. Someone else would say, who are your donor prospects? The words might be different, but the concepts are the same.
So a couple of final questions for the evening, and this has been fantastic. Do you have a favorite restaurant in Houston?
I do.
What's your favorite restaurant?
It's Frank's American Grill on Westheimer. I love fried chicken. That is my favorite food in the whole world. They have the best buttermilk fried chicken. I can't recommend it highly enough.
They do have great fried chicken.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Nobody else has it that I can find.
Do you go for dinner? Is that when
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
So it's it's near my office, so I go there for lunch many days. But they only have fried chicken on Fridays.
On Fridays.
At lunch.
Well, you can have it any night for dinner, at least on the weekends. I go on the weekends, and I keep thinking I really need to try new and different restaurants, but I love that fried chicken.
How does the fried chicken there stack up against Max's Wine Dive, do you think? Have you ever had the fried chicken there?
I've not had it there, so I'll have to try that if that's an option.
It's a pretty good chicken. Do you have a favorite sort of secret place that's in Houston that not many people know about?
Probably not.
Favorite little park?
I like Memorial Park. I love to wander around the park, and I love Discovery.
It's not a secret, is it?
It isn't a big secret. I love Discovery Green. I think that is just the most remarkable oasis in a metropolitan city the size of Houston. That
I love all the activity that's going on at Discovery Green.
It's so, who created that concept? I mean, how did somebody come up with that idea and sell it? I mean, that's the other side of it. That's a nonprofit.
Yeah.
Now there's some serious fundraising because they sold a vision that didn't exist, that was very counterculture to, what is it, across from the George R. Brown?
It is, yeah.
That was all parking lots, and I've complained frequently about the lack of my parking spaces. But it's such a gift to the city, and I think Houston is such an amazing place.
They have movies every once in a while at nighttime.
Oh, really?
They blow up, and we love to go to those. We bring like the little sit-out chairs,
how
and
cool.
there's a little lawn,
I did not know that.
it's a pretty fun thing. And then the final thing I wanted to ask you, work-life balance for you as you've gone, through working in New York City to your current time here at the United Way. What has work-life balance meant for you as a woman?
I don't have any.
No?
No. I am often accused of that deficiency. I really like what I do. It's interesting. It's different. I get to see Houston from a very different perspective from many other people. I work with remarkable people. I see these CEOs who are creating something out of nothing and who are making such an amazing difference in people's lives. And as I said, I'm an information junkie. I love to read, and I can get lost online for hours and not realize where I am. I just enjoy what I do, and so I have a great deal of difficulty balancing.
So that is not an unusual answer, but many people talk about that. And is it part of being a leader, whether you're a fundraising leader or a nonprofit leader, that we spend all our time thinking about work and thinking about ways that our work can make the world better? I mean, is this just sort of what life is going to be? I mean, people need to expect that, because I feel the same way. I'm constantly just thinking, if I'm not at work, I'm still thinking about it.
Well, and you asked a few minutes ago, or someone asked, what advice would you give to someone who is new in the career? And, it's very trite, but like what you do, because then it doesn't feel like work. And I think that's the difference, is that I hear people all the time talking about, I can't wait for my vacation, or I'm going to retire when I'm 27, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that sounds just awful. What would you do? So I'm really not a good person to answer that question.
I love that old quote, find a job that you love and you'll really never have to work another day in your life.
That's exactly right.
And it's not always true. We have our rough days.
Well, of course. I mean, there are days where I'm thinking.
But mostly.
I mean, my favorite line is, I love my job, but I can't stand the people. That you get frustrated, and, every once in a while I'll go and walk around the building if I'm really annoyed about something. That is, I think, my biggest transition from the for-profit to nonprofit world is coming from New York, is I say what I think. And I find that nonprofits are very disinclined to do that. And so I know the first few years I was at United Way, I was always being called in because someone was crying. And I would think, really? What are they crying about? Who? I don't remember that conversation. But I think perhaps I've learned a lot about modifying my thought. Think before I speak, I think it should be my motto probably. I think the nonprofit world would benefit from some more straightforward speaking at times so that we can all understand really what our purpose is and what we're all about. But
it's not expected of nonprofit leaders, though, to be straightforward speakers all the time. But you're absolutely a straightforward speaker.
But I've often thought I
get in trouble for straightforward
of course,
speaking stuff.
yes.
Do you sometimes?
I do. I have a lot of timeouts. So, but it's interesting. When I first made the shift to United Way, I really thought what I wanted to do was be a CEO of a nonprofit organization. And because I have worked with so many of them over the years through our leaders circles, through the consulting that I do, I learned fairly quickly that that was probably the last job I wanted. And I've had opportunities, and I so admire you and your colleagues who do this work, because the ability to balance the demands of board and staff and funders and the general public, it takes a remarkable skill set, and I don't think I have it.
Yeah.
But I can give you all kinds of advice.
And you give great advice. Always you give great advice. Ronnie Hagerty from the United Way has been our guest this evening. Ronnie, thank you so much for all the work that you do for Houston, for supporting nonprofits, and for making Houston a better place.
My pleasure. Thank you. It's a privilege. It truly is.
Thank you. Hey, guys, keep up the good work. We love seeing the stuff that you're doing, and we can't wait till next week.